Vera Marie Days Anderson was born in 1926 to Vera Irene Smith Days and William Harold Days. She joined a 4-year-old sister at home. Okay, I was born at home, at the farm home. I was delivered by my doctor, whose practice was either in Goodland, which is 27 miles away, or Canaredo, which was a flourishing little town at that time, 13 miles away. And how I knew, or they knew how for him to come, because there was no telephones at that time. And he got there some way, whether Dad went and got him or what. So it was either 27 miles or 13 miles. And that's quite a ways for a house call. And the neighbor lady, Maggie Shook, was there. My first home was a sod house. In this sod house, Dad and his uncle that he had bought the farm from was built right before Mother and Dad got married. And at that time, there were the outbuildings. And my uncle had a house which was moved to Goodland, and why they didn't live in that house, I don't know. But anyhow, they built this sod house. It was two rooms, and you entered from the east side, and they had what they called a porch, but it was more or less just an entryway, probably, maybe 12 feet by 5, and it had a cement floor. And you walked in, and this big room was the dining room, and it had a wooden floor, but it was carpeted, at least at the time I got there. And the walls were plastered and wallpapered, and it had one window. It was a pretty big window, and they always called it a cathedral window. It had a window seat, and I don't know what it was made out of, but the window seat was there. And Mother always had Priscilla curtains across those windows. And what else did they have in that room? And there was, I remember, they had it was heated by what they called a Topsy stove. It was a little square stove, and it heated both rooms. And they burnt coal and cobs in that one. And then they had what we called a day bed, and it was just kind of more or less a cot. Not too comfortable, I don't think. But anyway, it did pull out, and it would make into what would be probably a twin-size bed in case they needed extra bed for rooms. What else was in there? We had no radios. The lights were either kerosene or a gas lamp or a lantern or two. And from that room, they had the table and chairs. And that room led into the bedroom. That floor was wood, but Mother always kept some kinds of throw rugs or something on there. And in that room there was 2 beds. The folks had one bed, and Marguerite and I, and then later Betty, shared this bed. And we had a dresser. And I can't remember where they hung the clothes. But Mother curtained off one corner of it, and that was called the toy closet. And there was all kinds of stuff in there, and another couch. And like I said, it might have had 2 windows, but I think only one. And then going back to the dining room, it led to the kitchen. And the kitchen was made out of wood. Now, whether it was added later or not, but it was there at my time. And he went in there, and they had a big cook stove and a little oil stove. The cook stove, again, was corn and cobs, corn cobs and coal. And they had a cabinet that held the dishes and I think flour and sugar and stuff. And then they had kind of a cupboard, I guess you'd call it, that they kept the groceries in and food in and so on. And there was a bench in there that they had the water bucket on with water in the wash basin. I think that might have been all under a chair or two, I think. And this led out to another porch. It was just about like the front entryway. And out in the yard, they had what, I don't know, they called it a cave or a cellar, but it was several steeps down to the ground, and it was dark down there all the time. And that's where they kept their eggs and cream and I suppose any groceries or anything else they needed. The bathroom was outside, and it was a little ways across the yard, and that was a chicken house, and on the end of that chicken house was built this two-hole toilet. And sometimes that seemed like it was quite a ways away. And there was a barn, and I can remember an old granary, but at first they didn't have a granary, but they did, and they kept the car at home. Where do we go from here? Went to a one-room schoolhouse, and there was, like I say, I don't know how we got there in the morning, but we walked home every evening. But the schoolhouse was a one-room schoolhouse, and I think there was probably about 8 or 10. All grades were taught by one teacher. And like I said, then we'd walk home in the evening. We'd take our own sweet time getting there. And about the second or third year was when the dirt storms. No, that was in the 30s. Yeah, because Betty was born in 29, and then in the 30s were a bad 10 years. When we were at school, the dirt storms hit, and that must have been when we were about the 3rd or 4th grade. And the day would start maybe really sunny and sunshiny and so on. And you'd see a black cloud coming, and then the wind would start, and it would get pitch dark. The teacher, we had kerosene lights at school, but we didn't dare light them because the wind was blowing so hard. We didn't know. And it would get so dark that you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. So we just sat at our desks. Sometimes these would last, an hour, 2 hours. I can't really tell you how long, but they'd last a long time. And we'd just sit there, and then the dust would pile up a fourth of an inch high. And at home, it dusted in on the windowsills and so on. And at this time, it was in the 30s. Well, I wanted to tell you next about going home from, if it was stormy or snowy, Dad had hitched 2 horses to the trailer wagon, or really it was a wagon, Bell and Coley. And we'd crawl in the wagon, and Bob and Jean and Marguerite and I would ride to school in this wagon, and he'd come get us at night. How the teacher got to school, I don't know, because she lived about 10 miles from school. But snow didn't stop school any back there then. And let me see, we did lots of things together. Some of the things that they did, the schools every year would have a program that the kids put on, and we'd go to literary. And nearly every Saturday night there was either a barn dance or a dance that we went to. And when I was 3, Dad was elected county commissioner. I'll have to say this, he was the youngest in the county and 30 years old in a job he held for 12 years. But anyhow, he would go to town twice a day, and then on Saturday they'd go and do the groceries. And I can't remember back far enough as to how we always went to church on Sunday and a ball game on Sunday afternoon. And it seems like we spent quite a few dinners and so on at Grandpa's. Dad, Walter and George always played baseball. And so we were always at a baseball meeting. Let's see, what else did we do? When I was 12, they started a 4-H club. There was 25 of us, and you had to be 8, and 17 was there. And this was great fun. My first 2 years, I took sewing and cooking, and hated it each time. But the monthly meetings were fun because the men would play cards, and after our meeting was over, as kids would go outdoors and play party games and so on, or if it was inside, where we'd play games inside, and the women, I guess, just visited. But we would do tours in the summer and then get ready for the fair. Oh, I'm having a hard time remembering what else we did. Oh, when Bob and I graduated from grade school, you had to take an examination one Saturday and then the next 2 Saturdays in a row, and then 2 weeks later they'd have 8th grade graduation. Well, a week before, I took both examinations, but the week before graduation, I came down with scarlet fever. Betty had caught it from somebody at a dance that we'd all been to at Hale. And at that time, if the folks went to a dance anywhere, all the kids went along. And most of us started dancing. Like a neighbor come over and talked when I was 9 and said it was time to start learning to dance. So, but most of the time, we'd just sit there and play, or they'd have a place for us to play at the dances. And during those school years, we had whooping cough, Marguerite, Betty, and me, and Mother. And I think that was the only 2 things that we had at that time. I gotta think again.
Well, I was raised up by the golden rule in an old house with a patched up roof. We had a hard road, but it pulled us close